security guards. We don't know
Okay.
how on the ball they are at the moment with that.
Right. So we are muted as well?
Yep.
Okay, can I just confirm everyone can hear us in the room online? Excellent, thank you. You'll notice we are in a different room today in the council chamber, in the council offices, sorry. We may also have a fire alarm test, but we're not sure. So bear with us if that does happen. Okay, Bore da pawb, croeso, good morning and welcome to this hybrid meeting of the Environment, Regeneration and Streetscene Services Scrutiny Committee on the 4th of April 2025. And Councillor Sean Percy will be chairing the meeting. As well, just for members at home and officers at home watching, the camera in this room doesn't currently zoom, so this is the best view you're going to get, I'm afraid. So you will have to just bear with us on that front, but as long as the audio is working, I'm content to continue with the meeting. For those here in person and online, please ensure your phones are switched to silent during the meeting today. And online, if you just raise your electronic hand, we'll call you in to speak. And likewise, the few of us in the room today, I will keep an eye out for indications. For those online as well, please ensure your cameras are switched on if you're participating in the meeting today. So I'd just like to confirm that we will be scrutinising item 4A today from the Cabinet Forward Programme, which is the Highways Road Programme. So are there any declarations of interest from members this morning?
I see no declarations of interest yet.
Okay, thank you. I'm now going to move on to agenda item 3, which is minutes of the previous meeting on pages 5 to 16. Members, could I have a proposal and a seconder to approve these minutes, please?
I'll propose, Chair.
Proposed by Councillor Bob Wilford. And a seconder?
I second, Chair. Everybody second.
That's great, thank you, members. If you don't indicate to the contrary, I'll take it that these minutes are approved.
I see no indications of the contrary, Chair, therefore those minutes are approved as accurate.
Excellent, thank you. So we'll now move on to look at the items we're considering in today's meeting, and that is the Highways Works Programme 2025-2026. That's on pages 17 to 36 of our agenda pack. Before I go to questions, do any officers want to add anything to the report or introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, with me today is Steve Owen, whose service coordinates the works programme, and also we've got with us Alid Jones and Martin Brumby, who's online, who are key officers in pulling the programme together. So hopefully between us all, we'll be able to answer any questions you have this morning.
Excellent, thank you. So there are a number of questions we've had from the pre-briefing. What I've done is just group them into some themes just to help with the discussion. So we're going to take some questions on the member surgery process and the outcome from that. I know a few members have got questions on that. We're then just going to have some questions on the format of the report and the scope of the report. Just really kind of looking forward to next year's scrutiny session to make sure members have got all the information they want to see in one place. So there's a few questions on that to be taken forward by whoever is the chair of whichever committee does look at it after the changes that take place at the AGM. And then we also have a few questions on some specific projects and schemes as well. So I'm going to start with the questions on members' surgeries. And my first question is from Vice Chair Councillor Tim Bowen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Basically, we had the member surgery and we all put ideas forward of what we'd like done in the awards and so forth. But when the report had come out, it's something totally different. Can we just explain the logic behind why nothing was included, what we put forward?
I think to answer that question briefly, or as long as you want really, to be fair, is the section has a finite amount of money. That money hasn't gone up probably now for 10 years. So it's, it's a stable figure of around about £800,000 when it comes to roads resurfacing. Obviously, there are additional grants that come in. From our perspective, to be fair to everybody within our lead section, it's a tough old game. because basically what we're trying to do is prioritise the risk for the authority rather than, without trying to be funny, some kind of catalogue shopping list that people can pick off. So the issue for us is we undertake large surveys of the authority. There's huge problems associated with the network at the moment, which you don't have to be technically minded to realise that. But at the end of the day, there's probably been a lack of investment in the highway infrastructure over a period of time. So to answer your question, is where we feel that the councillors' needs meet the requirements of the specification that we feel that we have to adhere to when we're allocating work, they can be included. But if there's a risk out there where maybe, you know, a highway needs to be relayed totally or repaired, like we did in Carmarthen Road the other day, in Depot Road in Carmarthen the other day, which was a terrible road, one of the main thoroughfares through the borough, and we had lots of problems there. We have to look at innovative solutions to try to reduce the cost of that job. So to be fair, we put in a membrane on that road, which made it stronger. But it also meant that we didn't have to dig as deep. So that job was cheaper than it would have been if we'd have gone to full excavation. But what everybody's got to remember as well is year on year, as well as having the same pot of money, inflation has taken us back probably 30 or 40%. So we're getting 30 or 40% of work, less work done than we used to get done. So I think we've worked it out that put the highway into a position where it was reasonably fit for purpose, we would need a £20 million investment. But then thereafter, every year, we'd have to have over £3 million of investment just to keep it as it was. So if you can understand what local people would like, you know, being a local person myself as well, living in Portreath, you know, I'd love to have Sardis Hill done, let's just say that, you know what I mean? But when the technicians and engineers have gone out, they've looked at it just based on a condition survey, and the condition survey covers a multiple thing. It's not just how it looks like, it's whether it's a slippery road, whether the skid resistance is right on it. You know, obviously we've got barrier defects out there. We've got lots of competing forces, whether it be post and rail, and you only got to go up top road to see how many people are going through the post and rail. So to answer your question, I think we do it on a technical survey perspective. We understand members' needs and priorities, but there's just not enough money. So what we do is we turn around and basically, and Scott heard me say this on many occasions, I'm sure, and he's probably fed up with it. You can have the money spent wherever you like, but we have to look after the authority's interests and cover the authority's risk. And as a consequence of that, we put forward our proposal, which could end up with nothing in Pelena Ward and a huge amount of money in another ward. But it's not based on politics or where I live, or because I don't make those decisions. The technical team do that. It's just based on need from the survey information that we get. You know, historically, members did have a pot where they could spend, you know, £10,000–15,000 in the locality, but I think that we had some governance through from Welsh Government which made us change it. And to be honest, from our perspective, it was a better change because we could spend it where the risks were, rather than, as happened on certain occasions, Mrs. Jones's cul-de-sac, which, without being disrespectful, Mrs. Jones might have been having a hard time to get in and out the house, but it's probably having 10 cars a day, if that makes sense. So I don't know if that helps.
No, that's great. That's brilliant explanation, because that's something we haven't had before. Well, I haven't had, you know, to explain what actually is the logic behind the surgeries and what is done. And yeah, that's answered my question.
And as often as well, if we don't get the balance and timing right, then that 20 million backlog will keep increasing. Because if we're not clever and spending the money where it's needed, like Steve said, that means that roads are deteriorating and we're not in control of it. So if we're not careful, that 20 million will keep going up and up and up.
Yeah, that dodgy road gets worse every year.
Yeah.
Until it's sorted. And then obviously there's another dodgy road that gets worse every year. So I think what we're trying to say here is that, you know, if you look at it, basically we need to spend 20 million pound on the road to get them to a reasonable level. But then after that, it's over 3 million pounds. But if we don't spend 20 million on it, next year it might be 4 million pound you'd have to spend on it. The year after it might be 5 million pound because the road's always deteriorated. It's like your house in it, I suppose, if you don't paint it or you don't do ABC to it. So from our perspective, what we are trying to do is, and we're trying to make the money go as far as we can, because, you know, if you'll have seen, sometimes we'll use microsurfacing or surface dressings on roads. Now, people will say, well, that's a waste of money. But what it does, it preserves the road. We're sealing that road off so that the rain can't get into it and the frost can't get into it, etc. And it just prolongs the life of the road. It, in some ways, is false economy, because ideally we'd like to dig them all up and put them all back. But you're talking major money, and in places like the Sandfields and in some places like in Carmarthen, we'll find that our top road in particular was a prime example when we did some work up there, is that you're going down, you're taking the top off and you're finding that when it was laid initially, it was laid on top of the old dirt track road. So you've got to take the dirt out, and then so all of a sudden you're going down 600 mil rather than 200 mil to do a job. So, and we got the coal tar, which I won't get bothered with that as well, because coal tars are carcinogenic, and of course if we find coal tar in the road, which was laid years and years ago, probably costs us more to take it away than it does to relay it.
Yeah, lovely.
Sorry.
Thank you.
No,
That's great.
So
Thank you.
just if I could just summarising, Chair. I mean, there are things that are needed,
Yes.
and there are things that are desired. And as we've been squeezed, as Steve has said, we've been squeezed by cost increases and sort of static budgets. More and more focus has had to go on what is needed. You know, and at one time we had the member surgeries, and we tried to make sure that members had their 3 top priorities, then their 1 priority. And now we're really having to focus on what is needed. And a lot of those things that are needed, you can't even see. Steve's mentioned the skid resistance. If the skid resistance is gone on a roundabout or something, we've got to do something about it, because we know about it, and it's, you know, it's an accident waiting to happen. And yet somebody, you know, a member of the public will come along and look at it and go, well, that looks fine.
Yeah, why are you doing that?
But why are we doing
Yeah,
it? So,
yeah.
you know, we've just had to focus more and more over time on what needs doing. And of course, you know, if someone's got a bridge in their ward that needs strengthening, the member doesn't say, I want to have this bridge strengthened. No, I don't want to spend £500,000 and you've got a bridge to start with and a bridge at the end of it. Now, we know it's been strengthened and that's great. But as far as the public, they had a bridge before and they've got a bridge afterwards, you know, but sometimes that's what we've got to do. Same with culverts, you know, that could be expensive. And as in the programme, I'm sure will come up the parapet in Helbron Way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a brilliant explanation. I think it's answered a lot of members.
We'd like to give you everything,
Yeah.
to be honest with you. You know, that's genuine. You know,
Yeah.
we're not here to try and
No,
stop
no.
anybody having anything.
But you know, it's the surgery was there, then it's when it's come out. But that's a brilliant explanation, and you know, that's answered all my
Thank you.
my concerns anyway.
I think, look, just from my point of view as chair and kind of looking at this from a scrutiny perspective, and you know, I think, you know, members appreciate all of what's been said there and that explanation. I think what I'd sort of like to see in the reports, though, is if members are putting forward schemes, is the rationale of what schemes have gone in and what schemes haven't gone in and why. And I think that allows members to scrutinise and understand that prioritisation process in reality, because I think we know the theory of it, right? And I think that feedback will be important to members, because we sit in our surgery, we have that chat, we get the programme, and that's the point in which we see what was taken forward and what wasn't, but we don't get any of the rationale. And what we don't then know is, did it get taken forward, not get taken forward because it wasn't needed? Did it not get taken forward because there wasn't enough funding and something else was prioritised over the top? But we don't get to understand that. And I think from members' point of view, from a scrutiny point of view, it's very important that we understand some of those elements. And maybe jumping ahead a little bit from the wider programme as well, let's forget about members' suggestions for a moment. Even what officers say are priorities, we haven't got the budget to do all of those either. So when we're talking about management of risk and members' understanding of management of risk, we probably also should understand what's missed out of the programme here, what risk are we carrying? And I think when we're talking about the scope of the report, I think members need to be cited on some of that from a scrutiny point of view, rather than just seeing what activity we're doing. You know, let's look a little bit broader. What did we request to do? What did officers deem was necessary? What are we able to do? What risk are we still carrying? It's probably what I think I want to get to in terms of what the reports look like. Let me just bring a few other members in, because I can see a few hands up, and I know there were some other indications as well. So
Martin Brumby's got his hand. I don't know if you want to.
yeah, Martin, do you want to come in?
Well, I noticed Councillor Dacey is first, so I don't want to jump in front.
No. If it's in response to what's been said, happy if you come in, Martin, and I'll bring
Okay.
Councillor Dacey.
Yeah. I just wanted to add a couple of points. The members' surgery is an opportunity for members to. I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback from the room. So it's sort of bear with me.
We can hear you fine, Martin, but
okay. It's just I hear myself twice with a delay. So yeah. So the members' surgery gives members a chance to raise their priorities in the ward. And officers take those on board, and we do our best to deliver them. I don't want to go into Hogstein Owens because I explained it quite well. But to sit down and give an appraisal of everything that was raised by the members and why it can't go ahead and why this goes ahead before that would be a humongous task for me and Aled. And basically, I take your point, but we've only got a finite level of resources. We're delivering programs within the year for funding. We're bringing money into the council through our fees. And I take your point, but it is probably going a little bit too resource heavy to go into such depth on that. We've got our traffic section has got a 344k budget, of which we have to take our staff time out of that. And then we deliver what we can. So we focus on what we consider to be the road safety priorities after listening to the members' priorities. And we try and match both of those things. And once the road safety priorities are addressed, that means to make the road safe, we then come down to the other things like residence parking and this, that, and the other. Obviously, residence parking is going to be lower than probably junction protection or some other method of increasing road safety. Now, if it's as general as that, that's fair enough. But it's as you know, anyone doing this job would tell you it's a difficult balancing act, and we do our best and we do it professionally. But to sort of analyse every scheme in advance and produce this long-winded report, I've got to be honest, I think it's a little bit too much, to be honest, due to the resources we've got to do that sort of work, you know. So, you know, because there's only 37 hours in the week and we've got to do a lot in that time. Now, you may not be happy with that, but that's, I suppose, what this scrutiny meeting is about, for officers to give their feedback on what they do, you know. And so that was my view, really.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. I think, look, all I'll say to that is, you know, when the process was changed, as was referred to earlier, and the information that was given to members then, and the rationale was about making this more transparent. But a significant amount of this still happens kind of behind the scenes. And I think if officers are assessing the priorities put forward by members against the data, then that process should be made available. And that's certainly my view as chair, but I know that can be picked up outside the meeting really in terms of how that actually transpires ultimately.
Just say, Chair, obviously members can have what they want, because that's what we're here for as officers. But I mean, it would be quite an epic report, that is true. And I'm sure, for example, Alid would be pleased to organise it with any members who wanted a feedback session as to go through the individual thing. Now, that might be an easier way than producing a report for everybody that covers everything. But, as you say, that could be discussed afterwards with the scrutiny officers to see what best we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'll bring in Councillor Dacey.
Right, thank you, Sean. It's a bit of feedback here, so I didn't hear what Martin said originally. But to me, what's the point of having these surgeries with the members when it's whatever we suggest? I understand it's shopping list. They got to risk management, so you can get rid of a lot of the report by not having the things in the first place. Because if you're not going to take on what we are asking you to do because you can't afford it because of financial constraints, I totally understand that. So let's just get rid of the surgery until you get the money to do. They've got spare money, because everything. I've had plenty of conversations with Martin in the past about certain things going on, and I understand that they can't. It's not an infinite pot. But what's the point of having a surgery if nothing's going to be done from it? Are we just creating work for you to answer questions that we know the answer to already, because you need to risk management rather than what a shopping list we want? Thank you.
Could I respond to that? Or Dave wants to respond, I think.
Hi, morning all. It was supposed to be my last meeting the last time, but as the capital programme is very topical, I spoke to Mike yesterday and said I would sit in. Really interesting conversation, Chair. And as Councillor Dacey said, is there any point in having these meetings? And I, to a point, I share that opinion as well. But what I would say is it's important to understand from a member's perspective what their concerns are in the community and what voices they're having from within the community raising issues associated with the highway network. It would be a huge task to risk assess every single item and probably not practical. And I just wanted to put it in the context of the wider piece of work that's taking place at the moment within the council, and that's how we prioritise all projects right across the authority, from education to social services to leisure. And I think the chair has highlighted this before. How do you prioritise a school or a replacement of a boiler over a repair to a culvert, a drainage scheme, or a road safety scheme? Clearly, there's never ever going to be enough money to deal with the assets across the authority in terms of highways and or property. But some of the things that will be a real focus for us are the sort of statutory requirements of meeting the guidelines and the standards around safety, and that would be anti-skid. If there are accidents, then or hotspots, then we would use the evidence-based approach to identify that work. Now, we've obviously got a huge backlog of work. I don't need to repeat that. You're fully aware of that, both on property and highways. But some of the challenges we've got are around, as Steve mentioned, protecting the council's position. What we don't want to have is an accident that could have big or huge ramifications. And I know there were some questions around Helbron Way, for example. It's a big investment. We haven't got the budget for that, but we're very lucky that we've been able to capitalize on the LGBI money. But the consequences of not doing that work would have major impacts on the town centre. For example, if the bridge joints and the structure failed, but moreover, the protection on the fence there has corroded from the inside out. If a vehicle was to crash through that barrier, and we've had 2 accidents there where vehicles have gone partially through the barriers, if that was to happen where it crosses the main rail line, a vehicle or a truck was to go over there and land on the railway line, and there was a major incident, officers and the chief executive could potentially be facing gross negligence, manslaughter cases, and could face imprisonment. So, and we know for a fact that within the authority, there is going to be people killed on our roads. Every year, we try to tackle that. We've got a good record in Neath Talbot of reducing that. But we know for certain there will be accidents, incidents on the highway. And we've got to really focus our resources to prioritise safety of that highway network. And that's very challenging, as you say, from a member's perspective. You would and the communities would perhaps like to see pavements resurfaced or verge parking created, and we'd love to do that, as Steve said, in an ideal world. But unfortunately, we have to prioritise those sort of works to protect the council's position and to make it a safe environment for all. So they are the challenges that the guys face day in, day out. And finally, resources, of course, another issue. And there'll never be enough human resources or financial resources to tackle everything that we've got. And that's why the council are looking at a risk-based approach to trying to prioritise the capital programme across all the portfolios and all of the scrutiny committees. So I just wanted to put that sort of context there for you. And lastly, again, it is important that we understand from members the community's concerns, because we might be able to focus and get external grants to carry out some of those perhaps more schemes that would be welcomed then by members of the public. So we still need to understand what's happening on the ground out there from members, so that we can try and address those issues as the guys develop the programs. So I'll leave it at that. I've talked too much, really. But and then finally, as Councillor Dacey mentioned, I know that I think there is a substantial allocation being looked at, a little bit like the greening up money. So there will be a fairly substantial fund that may be available again for members to look at those other types of schemes, albeit there will, I think, be some criteria applied to those. So it wouldn't be that you could buy rugby jerseys for the local football team or rugby teams, but there may be opportunities that you could invest that in things that will make a difference in the street care environment. Okay, thanks all.
Okay, thanks, Dave. In fact, I'm going to bring some members in now before I bring everyone else back. Councillor Gareth Rice, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. feedback problem. A lot of the stuff I want to raise has been touched on already and explained as well. However, I still feel I got to raise that the disparity of amount of money going into different wards. I completely understand it's prioritising the big works, but as you say, it's challenging. It's challenging for us as ward members to go back to our residents and say we're only getting £5,000 spent in our ward this year, when another ward's getting 1,100,000. To them, the residents of my ward, it's just as important. And Steve mentioned earlier, Mrs. Jones in the cul-de-sac. It may not be a big issue on the big grand scheme of things, but Mrs. Jones in that cul-de-sac, who goes over that problem every single day, pays exactly the same amount of council tax as somebody going across anywhere else. It is important. And I've got to keep going back to Mrs. Jones and saying, oh, sorry, it's been pushed on the road. It may not ever get done. So I completely get where you've got to prioritise, but sometimes you've also got to look at the smaller jobs, which also leads me on to the other bit which Sean mentioned earlier about the report itself. And looking at maybe a future, it was my first time round this time. I put in, as you say, the shopping list of a number of things. To my naivety, I didn't keep a record of them things I've asked for. But that report doesn't show what I've asked for. I think maybe it'd be a good time so that I can go back to Mrs. Jones in the cul-de-sac and say, look, Mrs. Jones, I did ask for it. It has been requested, so it covers us as ward members, and it does sort of show them it has been looked at and it hasn't been overlooked, and they don't feel neglected. So that could be looked at in future reports. I understand it's extra bit of work, but even if you just highlight all the been asked for, even if you don't actually know why it hasn't been approved, at least then you can say it. And it also give an audit trail on Mrs. Jones potholes. And if it's like 10 years, then it should be looked at. Thank you, Chair. I'll leave it at that.
Sorry, thanks. Bob, do you want to come in on this theme? Because I know you've got a question.
Yeah, I have some. Actually, it's perhaps on the other side of it, rather than things that don't get done. First off, the elephant in the room, where's the other £250,000 for my ward that I asked for? No, I'm only joking. No, looking at the report here, my ward is a small amount. However, I do know that in the surgeries I asked for quite a few things, and quite a few of those small projects have been carried out. Small drainage projects that I asked for have been done. Covers on the road have been put in. I know that Glass Road has had a major resurfacing, and the micro surfacing has been done on the main A474. Now, when I go to my residents, and this is a matter of public record, and they see that amount is only spent, that's when the questions come. Is there a possibility to put on this spreadsheet the things you've achieved? Because that's not there. And how much they cost. Because then I can approach my residents and say, yeah, okay, that's in this programme at the moment. However, the resurfacing of Glass Road costs this, the resurfacing A474, the micro resurfacing costs this, and those drainage programmes cost this. So the council has spent, the officers have spent this much money.
Some of it could be revenue.
This money has been spent in my ward, and that gives me then a better kind of conversation with those residents.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Bob. And I think I'll add to that again, just in terms of report extent. And we've discussed active travel in these meetings before, haven't we? And sometimes from the point of view of maybe things that perhaps should have been spent funded by grant money, but actually from the public's point of view, there are works going on the highway, in the county, drop curbs, crossings, safe routes to schools funding. So if you're looking at all the money being spent on the highway, holistically, it helps us as members to understand what the council is doing, how it's addressing all the rest. And I know things are sitting in different departments at the moment, and that's making it perhaps a little bit more challenging to have that singular view. But it also helps us with the residents to say, actually, yes, although we're not getting resurfacing work, you're having a crossing, a footpath being done, there's a new cycleway going in, whatever that is happening. And as you just sort of muttered there, there's other works that happen as well from other parts of funding. There might be things that happen in the middle of the year that aren't on the programme. So what we don't get is like an outturn of the programme. We get what we're intending to do from these pots of money. We don't get the full outturn. Do you want to come in, Aled?
No, I was actually going to wait till you finish.
No, go ahead.
Just picking up on what Gareth said first, member surgeries. Maybe I need to send some apologies. Obviously, what I haven't done is I haven't sent the minutes for each ward, which is something, to be fair to you, should have had much earlier than now. But I don't know if picking up on what Mike said about reviewing what's been raised and explaining, maybe I think putting that in one report isn't really practical. And as well, I think the criticism previously that some reports are so extensive that it's almost impossible for people to know what's in it because of the amount. So I think it's difficult. So we have dealt with the rationale. We've explained it to you in the member surgery. I think I like Bob's idea about understanding what's been done the previous year as well. Mm-hmm. But not only, we're very focused today on the capital programme, and I heard you, Steve, mention it. But things happen, revenue budgets, we're arranging portal repairs in places, we're arranging small drainage schemes in place and things like that. Whether that information is readily available, that can be passed to each ward members, I don't know. I'd have to speak to Mike.
Just come back in there. Surely when you complete a job, you have a completion. I don't know whether you have a completion, a sign-off. I mean, we were talking the other day in council regarding degenerative AI and what we can use it for. We don't want a report, we just want a spreadsheet. Just a spreadsheet with work carried out, this much, this ward. And then you can see what's being done and we can present that to our residents and say, look, the council are doing this for us. So
I think just to come in by there, I think there's two things I'd like to say. When you look at the capital programme in general, we're giving you the capital programme as it is planned today. Now, so if we take the capital programme, if we hit issues with one particular task, let's just say, something might have to drop off the end. If the job went better than expected or anticipated, maybe something could be added onto the capital programme. So I think it's always wise to say that. With regards to, I do like the idea of what you said myself. And what we've got is we've got revenue teams. So let's say, we've got the drainage team that works under myself. We've got the pothole pro that works under myself. Now, it just adds another layer in. We could say to them, right, you worked in Rose today and you did X, Y, Z. How much do you think it cost? This year, to be fair, I think additional funding has been found for the pothole pro so that it can work throughout the year because of the materials it was using. It was using materials but I don't think we'd have a perfect answer on that because needs change on a daily basis. The team that was going to do the drainage job in Rose today may be up in Cummer tomorrow because something has happened. So we've got to have that. We've got to be, how can I say, agile in the way that we approach those things as well. So we can try our best, but it won't be accurate then. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think we could certainly look at the AI thing and what we can do in terms of reporting. I think we'd have to sort of idealize the costs, if you like, because we don't record every pothole, for example, and how long it takes and how much for every individual pothole. So we know where we were and we know we did the pothole, but we might have to give an indicative cost, for example, with the cost of the team divided by the total number of potholes in the year or something, like that. But we wouldn't be, like Steve says, we wouldn't be able to give
I think
without a lot of sort of work.
We are looking at a new pothole system, which we've been probably promised about 10 years now to come into place. But we get into the end of maybe the first part of that, and every team would have a tablet, and every team that would record the photo of the pothole, the time they were on site, the time they were off site, and the material that they used. So that would be computer generated and all that. It's something that we've been looking to try to do for years. And the issue is as well, the supervisors can send it out based on priority basis. It would go straight to the individuals in the cab, if that makes sense. And all the information would be sent back rather than on day sheets, which so that's what we're working on. If we can get to that, you'd have.
We don't want to, I don't want to say that members want to create any more work for you, because we know that things are tight anyway with resources and whatever. But with everything we're moving forward with in the future, these things are should be a matter of pressing a button. I mean, huge corporations obviously use recording systems where they're doing works, and I'm sure they're not sitting there in the cab with a pocketbook and writing down, are they? And you know, we've got in our refuge cabs now, we're putting the systems in there where they can identify things. So surely, I would think it wouldn't be, with the help of digital services, obviously it wouldn't be that difficult just to have a program that they could. And yeah, we're not looking for exact. I used 4 nails and 3 screws and a.
No, but I am, because I want to know how many bags of tarmac they use on a particular job. I think the issue is there's a permanent repair and a temporary repair issue. I think what we're trying to say is, and when I said it's taken us 10 years to get here, obviously digital services have got many priorities, whether it be in education, social services or whatever. So it's not a stab at them, but we think it would bring real benefit to the authority. We think it would bring things, there'd be efficiencies that would be organised. So in theory, we'd end up doing more potholes, and we wanted area based. So if we can deal with something rather than someone go from there, so from Rose to Langwynville, let's say, you know, everything is there. You know, more manual we're trying to do it at the moment. If an emergency comes in, we need to know where the teams are as well. So
yeah, good.
Just to let you know, we are trying.
No, thanks for that.
I come back in quickly. I gotta say, Steve, we got a fantastic team up with us and the Scott, and handling that area, and you know, I can't praise them enough for what it's only a phone call and they're on the ball. So you know, like that taken back. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I again from my point of view, I think it's quite reassuring to hear we're moving towards that more database understanding of the activity we're doing, because obviously from an operational point of view, it is really helpful to know, isn't it, how much material we're using, and it'll help us manage budgets and all the rest of it. So I think that's great. I think just coming back to some of the requests from the committee or the discussions today around what the committee might want. I mean, what all I'll say about length of reports is it's one thing having a lengthy report that the committee hasn't asked for. It's another thing having a lengthy report the committee has asked for. So I will make that distinction. If the committee's saying this would be useful information to see, even if it's once actually, just to get that full depth of understanding at a snapshot in time, it might not be that we need it every year, but maybe the committee wants to see that real world example of how that full prioritization's worked. So I'll make that point. And I think the other point is around outturn of the budget, and that's been touched on. I mentioned it again earlier. We set the programme at the beginning of the year. It doesn't go to plan. It never goes to plan. That's how council budgets work. We get revenue outturn, we get capital outturn, headline budgets from the council. Maybe we should be looking at reporting back to the committee. This is what we intended to do. This is what we ended up doing. Just within the bounds of what we've discussed today, maybe extending the parameters as well. But it would be useful for us to understand that as well, because as you say, Steve, if we underspend on something and something else goes in, well, if we don't know what the unmet needs that didn't meet the grade because of budget are, we don't know what the next job that's going to be done is. So we haven't got that transparency of understanding.
It will be brought forward from next year.
Well, and I think that's the other thing that members did raise, and I've had this as well, is we do get schemes that roll over that don't then appear in these reports. So that I had a scheme that was intending to roll over into the financial year, this financial year in my ward, into the coming financial year in my ward. It's not on the capital works programme for the coming financial year. It's in the capital works programme for the previous financial year. Now, we'd normally, in other council reports, we would show
a line item that's been rolled over. So, and I know that's quite a common thing to happen with the Highway Works programme, because things, we do run out of time, don't we? And we just bump them over. And again, that's good from a transparency point of view for members to understand, because sometimes things roll over, sometimes things disappear because other things happen, don't they? And we'd be able to understand that, okay, this is being done in next financial year, or actually this has been dropped for whatever reason. And at the moment, we kind of got to unpick that ourselves as well. Sorry, did you want to comment?
Just so usually the main difference is in the capital programme. If thinking about that comes through the capital programme steering group, and then either into the strategic leadership team or the cabinet or the council, depending on the level of need. So the big things that would affect it in a big way, there is a sort of formal process for that and a reporting process for that. We try and balance out the pluses and the minuses during the year generally. I take your point about if we're trying to bring it all together, the carry forward. I'm sure it's reported somewhere in another scrutiny, in another finance report. But I take the point that perhaps that's not good to see it all in one place, and we can certainly look at that on this.
Okay,
but not on this one.
Great.
And obviously you get another report usually from Dave about all the other sort of grant systems, the active travel fund, any active travel funding, resilience roads, transport funding, which is separate for this at the moment. The only thing I think, as I mentioned, looking at the scrutiny changes that have come in, I think there's still potential for those to be reported separately, and I think it's something we need to have a discussion with the scrutiny officers. If you want to bring that together, is how we do that. Because as it stands at the moment, it looks like those reports, potentially like active travel, would be reported to one board, whilst this sort of engineering programme would continue to be reported to the other board. So perhaps that's a discussion we need to have.
Yeah, we'll definitely take that particular point back, because that's how it was historically, actually, and some changes were made so they came under one scrutiny committee, even though they were in separate areas, and that's not an ideal scenario going forward. I think just one thing I'll say, just to officers present, really, I think probably what I'll do after this meeting is try and summarise all the thoughts and discussion around what the committee might want to see into some sort of letter that I can just send out then, because there's a lot of different suggestions and things to think about and distill, and perhaps I can just summarise that. And then maybe we can have a chat outside the committee about what's practical, what's not practical, but just to try and improve that report for next year, whatever committee it goes to, and said whoever the chair is, because it might not be me either. So I got a few other indications. And Scott, do you want to come in after members, or do you want to come in now?
I'll come in now if it's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's only briefly. I'm going to touch upon back in 2019, really, when the new policy came in. And I think it's fair to say, I don't think there was many more disappointed than me that we was going to go from a wish list, for a better word, into a programme that was going to be identified from that point onwards by officers associated with risks of the council. I mean, I do get the point in terms of what's been picked up, what is the purpose of these member surgeries, and it was a suggestion at one point, do we continue to run with them? I'm quite keen to make sure that we still run with them, because I think what you'll find is in the last surgery that we had, it isn't just around road resurfacing. It's an opportunity for members to come there and have a moan if need be, but also be constructive with officers and to give some feedback around quality assurances around neighbourhood services, and to make sure that our teams out there are doing what they need to do to ensure that our communities are kept clean and tidy. Because there are other budgets within neighbourhood services, where members periodically will come, for example, and say, I need a grit bin, or is the pothole pro machine able to help and assist? Neighbourhood teams also carry out the temporary pothole. So there's loads of different other aspects to the member surgery. So I do get what members are saying, but it isn't just about road resurfacing. I think that what officers said already, without really repeating, is there has been a lack of investment for the last 10 years. I think we're all mindful of that, and there's been no uplift to it. With the risks associated, it's important, I think, as much as I would prefer to have a wish list, I think it's massively of importance that we support officers based on their professional advice purely based on risk. And I can get the points, like Mr. Owen said earlier on. I'm trying to give assurances to the scrutiny that this isn't based on wards or politics. But I can see the scrutiny side of things as well, where they want to drill down to get a better understanding to ensure that it's not based on ward or politics. And it is something I'm keen to pick up maybe after this meeting with Mike and the officers, just to see whether maybe we can have a separate meeting or a seminar with members where we can drill down a bit more information and to give everybody that sort of opportunity to see where these risk areas are in terms of roads. Because, you know, like has been mentioned, we need £20 million and we need £3 million each year thereafter. And I don't see £20 million coming in the next 12 months and possibly not in the next 2 years, if I'm honest. I think we're satisfied to a degree that we've seen an uplift this year, you know, from the Welsh Government, but I certainly don't see another £20 million coming in. And as time goes on, these risks are going to get greater. And I think it's really important, you know, we've all got a responsibility and a duty as members outside of this scrutiny committee, you know, corporately across the board, to make sure that we keep people as safe as we can. So I do agree, wish list is absolutely what I'd like to see, but unfortunately, we've got to make sure that the council is protected as much as possible.
Thanks, Scott. No, I'll just pick up a couple of points from there. I think it's a few important things you said. I mean, from my point of view, I think the member surgeries are important. I don't think we should scrap them. And, you know, you've picked up a few reasons there. And some of the other things we talked about, there's grants available as well, isn't there? Like I said, if we're saying, look, there's a drop curve issue, there's a safety issue. Yes, it might go into this capital programme, but we can apply for road safety grants. There needs to be a pipeline of awareness of those issues, and they don't get picked up by automated machines scanning the highway. You need, you know, eyes on the ground, and that's members' role there, isn't it, to pick up those concerns. I think in terms of where I'm coming from scrutiny point of view, I take your point around, you know, the political side of things. I'm not particularly concerned about that, if I'm honest, in terms of money being spent in that manner. I think from my point of view, it's about members having sight of what the judgment and decision making of officers is and the rationale behind it, and then us having an understanding of that level of risk. Because, as you say, corporately, we've all got responsibility around that risk management. And if too much of it isn't available to us to understand, we can't make an appraisal if that risk management is happening in the right way. And we've obviously got to trust the professional judgment of officers, but we also need sight of it. And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to get to, is we've got a responsibility to be able to see that and be assured that it's happening in the right way. And I, from my point of view, it's not necessarily a political concern, it's a risk management concern. So I just wanted to make that clear, just in terms of where I was coming from with it. I've got an indication from Councillor Gareth Rice online. Gareth?
Yeah, Martin Brumby's before me.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd just like to sort of obviously support Councillor Scott Jones, what he said about the surgeries. I just wanted to say, when the question was asked by Councillor Dacey, why bother with the surgery, is, as Dave has also picked up, it's twofold. One is to tell us what your concerns are in your ward, so we're aware. It's only once a year. We don't hear everything all the time. We can tell you what the public has also brought to the table, and then obviously that's been put together. But what I think is most important for members, and this is my personal opinion, is it allows you to say to the public, I raised it at the surgery for consideration. But unfortunately, due to risk analysis, cost and budget things and other priorities within the council, officers couldn't put it forward this year. But we can't keep rolling that over year on year. So I think it's very important we keep them going. I think over 10 years, I think they've worked well. And I think it gives you the opportunity to go back to your residents and say, I did raise it on your behalf, but unfortunately, and officers can then answer that for them. You don't have to answer that, to say, well, it just wasn't a priority based on the available funding. So that's all I wanted to add in. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Martin. Sorry, Pam, can you... Okay, members, can you hear me at home?
Oh, excellent. Sorry, we're just having some trouble with the microphones being muted and all that. So, Councillor Gareth Rice, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Ron. I'm glad Martin just mentioned that, 'cause that's reflects on what I said earlier about having in the report something that everyone's asked previously, which is what I was going to ask now. I was going to ask a question about how do projects get funded when it's still at the survey stage, which you don't know how much it's going to cost, but also the survey's been completed, but the work is yet to start. We're now going into a new financial year. Does that money get carried over from last year's pot, or does it come into a new pot where there's no money because it's all been already attached to other projects? I will mention, and I know Martin is probably expecting it, my ward, as an example, the Lodge Lights, it's been ongoing for as long as I remember, way before I was elected. And I would like to see historically how long this has been ongoing, because that's not included in these reports. We say about safety, and you mentioned about Heilbronn Way and things. Lodge Lights, I've reported so many near misses there, and it is ongoing. I appreciate it's in the hands of the telematics people, but it's been on for years without any sort of result. So how long do we have to wait before these are done, and what pots of money are allocated to these works when they come in, or do we have to wait another year for it to be allocated to next year's list again? Thank you.
Could I respond to that, if that's okay? If the works are approved by the boards for the Capital Works programme, they will be done. So they get rolled over if we take longer to do them than we think we can. We've only got so much resources, so things do get rolled over, but I'm assured that they do get rolled over. New work then for the next year is also then processed, and we do our best to deliver what we can with what we've got. So you don't lose a scheme unless that scheme is developed and decided, well, we can't take it forward because of this, that, and the other. You know, it doesn't meet standards, the data's not there, we can't do anything with it unless we buy a huge chunk of land, which we haven't got the budget for, so that's not going to happen. So we do an intensive amount of work on these schemes, but I can assure you if it's in the programme, it will be done, although it may roll over for 2 or 3 years. And when we come back to Lodge Lights, you're going to have a report and a discussion with officers on that. And we have spent a lot of time on that, and we've employed Swansea Telematics. They are up to their eyes in other grant work at the moment, so we've had to delay that till they finish that, because it's not just about money, it's about bodies on the ground and professional people on the ground as well. You've only got a handful, that's a fact of life, and we can't do everything. So it's taking a lot longer to do stuff, but we do it in the end, and you may not like the result, but that is where we stand, unfortunately.
Okay, if I can come back to that, if you don't mind. As you're still going through the survey process, how can you carry money across if you don't know how much it's going to cost? You don't know what the end result's going to be, so we don't know how much. And this is just one example of what may be going to cost the borough, but obviously I will raise this because it's in my ward. So how much budget do we keep aside to make a result of that?
Can I answer that then? So we've got a Capital Works programme. Let's say we got 20 schemes. 344,000 is my allocation. It's been the same for 10 years. So I have to manage those 20 schemes within the 344. Okay. Those 20 schemes will obviously try to be delivered, but if they can't, they've got to roll over. Now, some of those schemes will be looked at, there'll be X amount spent. We give a budget at the start, but it's very difficult to give a fixed figure without detailed designing for free at the start. So basically we have to manage that, and we do liaise with members on all schemes, as you're probably aware. Budgets go up, budgets go down, things don't get done. We can't add anything in because it's been approved by board, but we have to manage that internally by officers, you know. So you've got to rely on our professionalism, our impartiality, and give us a certain amount of latitude to manage these things going forward. Because they can't just distinctly say, well, that's the budget for that, because it's not. You could have a £10,000 scheme that becomes a £30,000 scheme. The other scheme then that we want to do that year will be rolled over, and the budget will be adjusted, and we'll take it from that. It's a very big balancing process because we're not detailed designing schemes to the nth degree before we put them in the programme. We haven't got the resources for that or the funding. So we're designing when we get approval, and they will develop in conjunction with members. And lodge lights is a classic example. We spent thousands on lodge lights. We've been going for 5 years. And to be honest, I'll tell you now, there is no real outcome to it. And, you know, we'll go through it in detail with you, but that's a good example of a rollover, and the work that's been put in behind it. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's...
Yeah, it does. But you know, at the end of the day, there are safety issues. I don't want to sort of take the whole beating just about lodge lights. There is safety issues there. There are near misses there on a weekly basis, if not daily. And of course, as was mentioned, Highborn Way, if there's an accident there and somebody gets hurt or worse, then we can be held accountable. But yeah, I appreciate there's work going on, but you know, what I was going to ask was money, and you've answered that, where the money comes from. So that's set aside. So that's reassuring to know. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Gareth. I've got a couple of other questions now from members about some other schemes. So I know Councillor Dacey, you had two questions. One was in relation to the feasibility spending, and just some clarity really about where that money goes when it's allocated, and then you've got another one just about the extent of the Highborn Way works. Now it's been touched upon already, Highborn Way, but do you have those questions to ask, Andrew?
Yeah, I'll only ask the one because we've touched on Highborn Way. The first one is like there's £25,000 in the Aberafan ward spent on a feasibility study on a crossing by Blancos, which has been relayed in tar rather than taking tile up. If it's cost £25,000 for a feasibility study, that's a lot of money to tell there was a lot of traffic, and there's been a few near misses, and obviously a fatality recently of a well-known ex-councillor and mayor. And so I think the £25,000 feasibility study, couldn't that have gone just to make it a crossing in the first place, a pedestrian crossing? Or right, go on. That's the only question I got. Forget the Highborn one.
Okay.
No, thanks.
I suppose what it comes down to, councillors, is the process that officers have to follow. And as part of our directorate or our remit, we have to charge our time, which carries a multiplier, to schemes. So to sit down and look at that, to say, you know, what's the accident record here? We've got a crossing further down the road. Can it be moved? How many people are crossing there? You know, does it meet the sort of standards, visibility, safety? I know, obviously, the fatality, I know all about that. So we've got to sit down and spend officers' time pulling together data, looking at what can be done, preliminary designs, looking at surveys of people crossing, where they're crossing, linking the two crossings together, looking at the wider picture, traffic coming off the roundabout. All that takes time. The clock is ticking. We have to charge for that time. So if I put in £5,000 on that, I won't be able to spend very long on it, would I? So to give it its just deserves, I have to charge, and the only way I can get the money is through the capital programme or through an individual pot, which is capped, and that's used for other things. So to put it in there, we put it in so that we could combine the two, the feasibility budget, which is not part of the capital programme, and the 25,000. So if we had to do something, there might be some money in there to help start with some preliminary works or to deliver it, depending on what we come up with. But that's a scheme that's going to take a lot of attention from officers, a lot of discussion with members, and we develop it together. So that's why that chunk of money was put against that, to give us a chance to look at it with the degree of depth it deserves, following concerns and the fatality that happened last year.
Can I come back and ask Sean a minute? Can I come back, Sean? I will anyway. Right. The feasibility study, like the crossing is busier on a weekend. So does the feasibility study cover the weekend when the church is busy, when there's christenings, when weddings, funerals as well, and a lot of things happen out of normal standard hours. Do we do the feasibility study on the weekends and evenings?
We can ask to take the evenings into account. We already do parking surveys in the evening and on a weekend, so we can look at that. There's a lot of data to be gathered before we spend huge amounts of money at the capital programme on doing that. What we try to do is analyse it, come up with a professional, educated assessment, and then obviously apply the physical works to that assessment to deliver the best outcome and the best value for money. That's what we do as professional officers on behalf of the authority, so that the money is spent as best we can. And like I say, unfortunately, there will be differences of opinion, but we try to back that up with our risk assessment and our evidence-based approach through surveys. So that one has got a slightly beefy amount of money to back it up with money from the feasibility pot to actually do a top level job.
I'm not calling your professional ability into account, actually. I'm just thinking that, so I don't think it's a go to Martin. I just want to know how the feasibility is carried out. And is it carried out when the crossing is potentially at its busiest? Because if we look at it from Monday 9 till 12 in the morning or whatever, it's not going to be busy. But on a Sunday, Saturday afternoon, Saturday evenings, and things when the blank goes is busy and people are crossing the road. So that's I'm not calling anybody professional into it at all. So
no, I wasn't suggesting that. What I was trying to say is that what officers do on behalf of the authority, they're employed as professionals, and we're applying that professional standard. We will, of course, talk to you, and all these schemes are developed with the members, and obviously we can target those times as well as the daytimes to get the overall demand for that crossing. So yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to move on now because we've probably delved a little bit too much into detail on one particular scheme. I think it was important for Andrew to ask that question just in terms of how that money moves around, because effectively it's an allocation from the capital budget into Martin's team, isn't it, to carry out that work. Because I know there was perhaps a bit of concern maybe we were paying somebody sort of external to do that study. So I think that's clarified that question. So the only other question I had now, which was again, it was over a specific scheme, but in terms of some of the valleys, the Glencorrwg bridge project, and I think again maybe it's one of those things, understanding all the works that's planned on the highway, where that sits, I suppose. I think there's a big scheme going on there. This doesn't outside, so it's outside of this programme.
I mean, obviously Dave's team obviously have had grant monies for that. So that information can be shared with you. So it's totally outside of this programme.
Yeah.
And if you want that information, we can share that information with you.
I just find it's going on to everybody's individual wards now.
Yeah.
And if it's going to be like that, we're going to be here till 8 o'clock today.
But that's a big scheme. But that information, so the question is easily answered. It's outside this capital programme.
Yeah.
It's not a maintenance. It's a large, a large scheme that is being dealt with bids to Welsh Government, and that information can be passed to you all.
Yeah, and it's critical to that particular location as well. It's about access, isn't it, in and out of a very tricky location, really.
And it's in information that comes to you in the other report you get on the other side of the capital programme, which is all the sort of grant bids and that normally comes from Dave's team. And there's of the local transport fund, which will be in the report to come to you, 730,000 for that, for the next stage of that work. There's grant funding for that.
I think it's one of those ones again that just touches on that members get an understanding of risk and how we're dealing with risk. Obviously that particular project, there's a huge risk there in terms of community being cut off, in terms of the condition of structures and all the rest of it. It's being addressed, but we're not seeing all of that risk together, are we? And I think that's probably why it's important to flag this one up, because we're dealing with it, but we can't see all of these risks together and what risks are what's being carried and what's being addressed. Jeff, are you happy for officers to give you an update outside of the meeting for progress on this one?
Yeah, but relating to that project now, Chair, Dave mentioned earlier, right, about risks and the accidents and safety and everything to the public and the liability on the council. But at that junction of the A4107, right, there's been 3 accidents in the past few years. And I have asked for a mirror to be put back at that junction to prevent accidents, but it's been refused because of the ongoing works, which we still haven't got a date for. And I just feel it would be better to prevent accidents than have them carrying on. I can't see that a huge cost of a mirror being put back there to allow people who are stopping at the bottom of Mystic Road Hill and they have to look up to Lois Terrace. The vision there is absolutely terrible, and I have wrote to Steve
Okay, Jeff, I think we probably delved a little bit too much into the detail on that scheme. I understand officers have, responded to you with the rationale there around why that's not been taken forward. I think again this was important to bring up just in the context of looking at all of the highway risks and how they were being addressed. But if you want to pick that up again with officers outside the meeting and perhaps speak to the cabinet member as well, I suppose, if you're not satisfied with how that's been dealt with.
Okay, Chair. I just like to say, mind how many more accidents are going to happen. That's all. Thank you.
There, so that's fine. Okay, members, are there any other questions that I might have missed from my list before I draw this to a close? I think I've ticked them all off.
I was only going to say there's no point having member surgeries going forward because we're dealing with it quite adequately in Scrutiny.
Perhaps if I could just make one point, which just picks up on everything is now horribly expensive, whatever you want to do, all sorts of schemes. And I think, it's something you could do. You may not think it's gone up enough, but if you get your pay slip out now and you look at it 10 years ago or more, and you think how with inflation it's gone up, and you think the money we've got to spend on the roads is the same now as it was 10 years ago, and materials, we see, Ukraine and all sorts of things, they've gone up much, much more. So, this the problem we're in. Everything is horribly expensive now.
And I think, back Mike's words that probably we could have got the old table done years ago, and then we're lucky if we get half of it done. That's the best way to look at it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, this just comes back to that fundamental point, really, isn't it? Is understanding that risk, the unmet need, and then feeding into then decisions being made corporately around allocation of capital funding, because ultimately it's within the council's gift to distribute what limited capital funding it has in the way it chooses to manage all of the risks. There's highway risks, there's risks all over the county, isn't there, with education, social services, as we've mentioned as well. So I think the more information and understanding we've got, what risks we're carrying where, it just allows us to be assured there's an informed decision being made around that pot of money. And it might be that, Cabinet decides at some point in the future that they can reprioritise more money towards this area. It might be that all those risks weighed up. It doesn't happen, but, we've got to have that conversation. Dave, have you got something to add before I bring this item to a close?
Yeah, just a couple of things very briefly for you, Chair. Mike alluded to it earlier, but yesterday I saw the new cabinets that are scrutiny cabinets that are proposed. So you could find that active travel, bus franchising, all regional transport related projects, and all of the big projects that you've talked about today are likely to be reported to a different committee, to the one that seems to have a lot of the interest in those areas. So I'm not quite sure how scrutiny chairs will manage that, and something probably a discussion that needs to take place outside of this meeting with scrutiny officers. And then lastly, and Chair, you may be aware of this as you sit on the scrutiny for the corporate joint committees, but all grants from 2026 will be processed through the corporate joint committee. So every active travel project, every road safety scheme, the local transport funds, all major projects are going to be in the mix in the region with the same pot of money. There is something like close on just under 300 projects regionally that have been identified, and we're competing in that process now in terms of risk. There are qualitative and quantitative assessments undertaken as to where you get in the pecking order for schemes to be delivered within Neath per Talbot. So it's going to another level. It's getting a little bit removed from us at a local level. So we really need to be, or members need to be minded to that, so that you've got an eye on that in the future to make sure we get our equitable share of that funding going forward. So it'd be really important, Chair, when you're in the scrutiny representing us, that you keep a close eye on that going forward. I'm sure officers representing Neath per Talbot will be fighting their corner as well, but it'll be very important for you to keep a weather eye on that going forward. That's all I wanted to mention, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. That is really important for members to note. I think we'll all just have to keep an eye on how those processes sort of reveal themselves. Really, I mean, the corporate joint committees are quite. Me and Tim are on these boards, aren't we? And they are a bit complicated, and yeah, I think it just does add an extra layer of complexity that we probably could do without. But we've got to work within the system, and we just understand it as best we can. Okay, so I will now just bring members to page 23 of the report, where the recommendations are listed, and just ask for a proposal in a second just to finish this item.
Happy to propose, Chair.
Proposed by Councillor Tim Bowen here.
I'll second.
Seconded by Councillor Bob Wilford. Okay, so members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, I'll take it this report is approved.
I see no indications to the contrary, Chair. Therefore, this report has been approved.
Okay, so I'll now move us on to our next item, which is item 7, which is the forward work programme. We don't have any performance monitoring items today. So that's on pages 37 to 44. It's included for members' information. We did have a discussion on this in pre-brief as well. But we'll run through a couple of things. I don't know if Tom wants to pick this up.
Thank you, Chair. So as the Chair alluded to in pre-brief, we just sort of had a run through of what happens. Obviously, we had a site visit, which I think members found really useful, and obviously want to thank officers for putting that together. Since our last discussion and requests members made, we've added a wild fox update to the 2nd of May meeting, and also the fleet and heavy plant renewals report is coming back to the committee after we looked at it in its sort of not complete form previously. We've also requested a Burrows Yard verbal update, which is likely to be in private as well, but we're just working out the format for that. And since we last spoke, I haven't had a chance to speak to the chair on this yet. James M. Davis has advised that the changes in access approach to Parks and Gardens report is now ready. So if members are keen to take that into the 2nd of May agenda, we can have that report. So you may remember there was a pilot on that, and now this is a report coming back since that. So I don't know if that's something you want to think on, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Tom. And the only other items is, there's a list of reports that are still pending to come to the committee. So there's a good list there of items that we're still having discussions with officers around. Things like the place plans, for example, as well. So are there any questions from members on the forward work programme at the moment? Obviously, some of this might need to be divvied up among the new committees, depending on how responsibilities change after May. So there is a bit of uncertainty post the 2nd of May. But I'm still happy to take items to put them on the forward work programme. So if members do want to get in touch with me before the AGM, we can consider those items then. Okay, fantastic. Right, so my next item is urgent items, and I have none. So that brings the business of today's meeting to an end, and just want to thank everyone for their attendance this morning and all their contributions. Much appreciated. Diolch.
Thank you, Sean.
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Sean.
Bye all. Have a good weekend.